If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. What a treat we've got for everyone. We have the one, the only Paris Lees, who is the author of The Superb. I don't know what accent that was. The Superb, what it feels like. There it is. What it feels like for a girl, which will now be spinning in our heads. It's a sensational memoir, I would say. I can't remember. I actually wrote a book endorsement for it, but I can't remember what I said. But it is a sensational must read. It's full of so much honesty and it's so candid. It's moving. It'll really grab you by the lapels. It's a brilliant, brilliant read. It's so insightful about the experience. I mean, I suppose the first thing I want to start. Oh, hi, Paris, by the way. So it's just me.
Hello. Hello, how's it? Nice to see you. Thank you for having me on and for the great introduction to the book. And can I just say, it's great to be at this stage because you know that I've been writing this since like forever and a day. And it's like, I know what I've been trying to do with this book. So to now, over the past like few weeks, people are going, oh, I like that about it. And this works. And it's like, it's just amazing. And I'm really grateful for all of the support. And it's lovely to speak to you as well. Like, I feel like it's been a long time since we've been face to face. So this is a poor substitute, I feel, for being able to give you a good old hug.
It's a weak substitute. We will hug and probably get drunk at some point. In fact, Paris is currently in a flat where I have been drunk. So, but we'll do that.
Oh, yeah. You broke my chair, by the way.
Did I?
Yeah, which you never replaced.
That's really bad. I should replace that chair. I can't remember doing that, but I will replace it.
It was a long time ago. I won't hold it.
Already a costly interview in my case. But to paraphrase Queen Elizabeth II, we will drink again. So I want to start actually with something that I've noticed. I think you tweeted it. It was there. I didn't dream it. You said it somewhere that you don't want this to be seen per se as a kind of trans memoir, but obviously it's the memoir of someone who is trans. But that's not the same as here's a big guidebook to the life experience of trans people in general. So I just want to start with that.
Well, I mean, you're gay, right?
No. What? No. My mum's watching this. I haven't told her.
I know things about you and James, and one of the things I know is you are gay.
Yeah, I'm a massive homo.
Would you describe Champs as a gay book? Right. And obviously that's different because it's a polemic and this is a memoir. So obviously I can't write a book about my life. But I think the thing that I would compare it to is like, is David Cameron's memoir a man book?
Or a book about a man who liked pork? Yeah,
well, okay, I don't want to get into that, but like, I really don't want to think about it actually. But like Michelle Obama's book, do people refer to that as a woman book?
Exactly.
Or a woman memoir? And of course it is both of those books. You know, David Cameron's book is necessarily about being a man, a particular man at a particular point in history. The same with Michelle Obama. You know, her book is necessarily the story of a woman of color, you know, at a certain time and place. But it's just a very odd way to frame it for me. And I understand why people do it, because it's one of the few places that trans people have been allowed to have a voice traditionally is the genre of memoir. But I will say anybody wanting lots of juicy transition details are going to be really disappointed. And actually one of the reviews that I got online, somebody was saying, I hesitate to praise a trans memoir for being really thin on trans stuff, but she really doesn't go into it that much at all. And it's like, well, actually, that's because I never said it was a trans memoir. You said it was that. So, yeah, it's for me, that's like just one little part of it, really.
Now, let's just talk about your background. So you grew up in Nottingham. Tell me about your family. Tell me about I want to hear about your dad and your mum, to be fair. Both your mum and your dad, and growing up on a council estate in the East Midlands.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's difficult because I have presented a version of my mum and dad in this book, which is based on my perception of them, you know, almost like 20 years ago. And, you know, all teenagers sort of, you know, go through a phase where they say they hate their parents, right? Mm-hmm. I possibly had more reason to feel that way at that time. And so this book is a really difficult exploration of what it meant to grow up in a town like that at that time, being who I was, you know, which is trans or just being coded as different, or queer or pufter, whatever people were calling me at that time. And then not really having the support of your family either. So, my dad's a pretty strong working class bloke, used to work on the doors at the local pub. He's like a tough guy, and he just didn't get it, and he wanted to toughen up his sort of firstborn son, that didn't go very well. I mean, I am tough as old boots now, so maybe it did, but yeah, obviously it didn't grow up to be what he thought I was going to be. My mum, it's not her story, so it sort of focuses on this sort of really difficult time of my puberty, but she was very loving and affectionate and did a lot of good things and was a good mum to me in many ways. And my dad, I see in retrospect now was doing things that he felt were the right thing for me at that time. But I didn't feel supported by them, Owen, and I didn't not 100%, not unconditionally, and I didn't feel safe at school. I didn't feel safe walking around my hometown, and I didn't feel particularly safe going home sometimes as well, because my dad was a very intimidating man. Yeah, so we've got a plane. Sorry, do I need to do that last bit again?
No, not at all. No, just, I can't really hear it. And I should also correct myself, because I said Nottingham, but it was Nottinghamshire, of course.
Yeah, well, it's same difference. Yeah.
I mean, I suppose the cliche we always have as LGBTQ people, it's very different, of course, being a cisgendered. For those who don't know what that means, it means my gender identity aligns with that assigned at birth. A cisgender gay person coming out is obviously a very different experience, but there's some overlap in the sense of knowing you're different, I suppose, isn't there? So tell me about that. Is it because that's what we always, what I think queer people have settled on when they talk about this is, when did you know you're different? Because when you know you're gay or trans is often comes a lot after that, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, it's like with the whole certain people, saying that, Stonewall shouldn't be talking about trans stuff because it's just like two completely unrelated things. I'm sorry, it's not. Like, you read this book and it's quite clear, that I'm getting called a bender, I'm getting called a pufter, whether or not I was gay, like I'm being homophobically bullied. And it's very upsetting to me that we know this is still happening today. I read a story this week about a 12-year-old boy who his family say he was a very sweet, sensitive little boy, and he was being homophobically bullied, and he was terrified of going back to school, and he took his own life at 12 years old. I don't want to live in that country, Owen.
No,
I don't want to live it. I have to believe that we can do better than this. We are failing these kids. So I'd love to say, that these experiences that I went through were unique to me on a council estate, in Nottinghamshire, at the start of the millennium, but it's still happening today, and we're not hearing from these kids. And that's the other point that I'd like to say is, we're hearing so much from people who say that they're being silenced. All we seem to do is hear from people saying that they're being silenced in the national bloody media. And actually, the people who are silent are the kid that's afraid to get on the bus to school, the kid who's afraid to go home, the kid who's afraid to say who they are. And by definition, they don't have power. They don't have a platform. They don't have a voice. And I grew up feeling like I didn't have a voice. Well, I've got a voice in 2021. And this book, for me, is the process of going back and handing a megaphone to that kid that needed a voice then, and who desperately wanted to be seen and heard and wasn't.
Now, It's a Sin was something which I suppose rarely for an LGBTQ drama managed to cut through to a broader, straight, cisgendered audience. And one of the things that really struck me about it was how LGBTQ people become a kind of substitute family who often pick up the pieces, to be honest, of the damage inflicted by the family, the biological families of LGBTQ people. So tell me about how you met your and we're a complex family, and we have all sorts of problems. People should not obviously glamorize the huge problems within LGBTQ circles, racism, misogyny, transphobia. There's a lot, actually, to be honest. But nonetheless, an imperfect family. Tell me about how you found, finding that different family, and what impact that made on you.
Well, I was just so desperate to escape, and I've said in the interviews, that I've realised writing this that I was an escapologist, because I would literally contort my body to get up through the coal grate, and my dad would sleep with his bedroom door open sometimes, and the stairs sort of creaked like a crypt door opening in an old horror movie, and so you had to know where to put your feet, and I was like a ballerina going down these stairs, and I'd climb out of windows and over walls, and anything really to get out, and I remember this is honestly, like, I used to take the bus into Nottingham on Tuesday nights, because they did a student night at a club that I used to go to, a gay club called NG1. And I was at school, right? So I'm like 14 or something here. And I would take like Basement Jaxx's Rooty album on CD, for God's sake. Right, so this is like before Spotify and everything, and they would play it. If you gave it to the guy behind the bar, they would play it on student night, and I would stay out all night, and I'd just meet these amazing, interesting, glamorous, outrageous people. And of course, back in Hucknall, I was the puffer, I was the bender. Nobody would sit next to me. At school, people didn't want to walk home with me. I wasn't invited to parties. I was basically a leper. It was that sort of social pariah status, I guess. No offense to people with leprosy, actually, but that sense of like, you are completely stigmatized and not part of the group. And and then I went to these clubs, which I was way too young to be in, and people told me that I was cool, that I was interesting, that I was attractive, that they wanted to hang around with me. So of course that's very intoxicating, and it's validating, and I saw some people criticizing me online the other day, saying, oh, she's desperate for validation and attention seeking and all this kind of thing. And it's like, well, yeah, because everybody needs to feel good about themselves. And I literally grew up feeling like there was something wrong with me. So if people tell you that you're not good enough, that you are a pervert, that you are inferior to other people, that you don't deserve to have the same sort of life or the same sort of respect afforded to other people, why would you not gravitate towards the spaces where people tell you that you do have value? And one of those spaces for me was nightclubs, which, that's what people did, in 2001. You went out on a Friday night, you went to a nightclub kind of thing. So I think clubbing itself occupied a slightly different cultural space at that point. And one of the others, Owen, was I would get into cars, and I would meet some very dodgy older men and let them take advantage of me. And I talk about that in the book as well, because I think it's really important we have that conversation.
And you do it so candidly and wonderfully. It's a very important thing to talk about. I mean, before I ask you a bit about that as well, you're an extraordinary woman, and you wanted from a very early age to be, for that extraordinary nature of yourself, to be validated, I suppose, that one day you were going to be, as you became, so prophetic. Lots of people have that ambition, but they don't, become a trailblazer with lots of achievements under their belt at a young age. But tell me about your ambitions, what you wanted to be, and maybe why. What do you think drove that?
Well, I have this joke that, like, one day when I was like 5 or 6, I just looked around me and said, "Oh God, I've been born in the proletariat. This is not going to be fun for me." And I was really precocious as a child. Like, what's that baby in Family Guy? I was like, I really was, and I can see now in retrospect that I was a real pain in the arse. And my dad was saying, you were just so clever from a young age, and used to point out inconsistencies and criticize us and everything. And And you know, joking aside, I did realize that, you know, being me in a town like that, I was very intelligent, and I just thought that my life would be easier if I was in a middle class house, you know, where creativity and sensitivity was perhaps more celebrated, and it was quite a violent and a tough world, right? You know, my dad would go out, and you know, it was hard graft. You know, he was working, you know, as a builder and a roofer. You know, it's and I understand my parents and their lives in context now, in the sense that, you know, they had to struggle, you know, and life is really difficult for people in those towns. You know, just putting food on the table and getting up in the morning, getting your kids to school without having this child that you just don't know what to do with. And so I had all these fantasies. I wanted to go to Oxford, I wanted to go to Cambridge, I just wanted to escape, you know. And I also had I knew that I was smart enough to do it, if that makes sense. So I didn't want to be famous for fame's sake, but I did want to be in a space where it was all about safety for me. You know, I wanted to go and be with the people that were a bit more educated, a bit more sophisticated, a bit more cosmopolitan. And, you know, I just fantasized of being, you know, Samantha and Carrie from Sex and the City. And that's basically what I've become. But yeah, I don't know. The thing I always say as well is that I'm not the only trans person from my hometown, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm not the only trans person who went to my school, and I'm not saying this to boast. It's the more interesting story to me. I am the only person that's been and spoken at the Oxford Union and Question Time and has a book deal out with Penguin, and is in a very middle class world now. And I think we should talk about that and talk about the oppression that that keeps people in those communities in their place. You know, keeps them down where they're supposed to be, because and I think when we talk about the trans thing, it obscures that transition, and for me, that's the real thing we should be talking about. Does that even make sense? I feel like I'm waffling a lot.
You're not even waffling at all. It's funny you say that, because I do waffle a lot, and I also do interview people who also waffle, and you're not waffling.
Good.
So you spend a bit of time in a young person's offenders institution, young person's whatever, you know, a young person.
At Borstal. It wasn't actually called Borstal at that point, but like, I love that film Scum, although it's like really hard to watch in places. But I just think Borstal sounds cooler. Not that going to young offenders is cool, but it makes me sound tougher if you tell people, yeah, I went to Borstal. Yeah.
Well, you know, I'm not a fan of the justice system as it's currently set up. And well, I was going to. I mean, the experience is generally, obviously, you get people stuck in a cycle of reoffending, and they're not, you know, the root causes aren't dealt with. But what I would say is, tell me about how you ended up there. But also, actually, there was, I suppose, the reason I gave that caveat is you did actually get some positive experiences out of it, if we're going to be honest.
Well, I did, but it was sort of in spite of the system, really, because and I didn't really explore it in great detail in the book, because I had a very specific story that I wanted to tell, which was this quest to escape Hucknall, really, and you know, the book isn't a polemic, right? I do think that it'd be quite hard to get to the end of it and not have some strong feelings about, you know, what I experienced and what you might think we would want to change in society. But I just wanted to tell a good story. But there was this whole thing where I wanted to do education in young offenders, and they didn't come up with the goods. And I was in there for like 8 months. So you tell me, why couldn't I have done my A levels when I was in there? You know, and so in lieu of that, I just sort of read everything, because they did have a library, and I read Oscar Wilde, I read Jane Austen, Ian Fleming, and Trainspotting as well, which is one of the books that really inspired this one, because that just blew my mind. And so it did give me a time for pause and reflection. But the reason I wanted to talk about that is, I just feel like, okay, so I committed a crime and that was wrong. And if you read the book, you'll have an understanding of how I got to that point of being involved in a serious crime like that. And I paid my dues. If if people want me to be punished for what I did, well, I was okay. But that doesn't, what do you do? Just throw. Sorry, let me start that again. What do you do? Just lock somebody up and then throw away the key and just then write them off and say, well, you're bad, and you're out of the game now. And people have done that to me when I was growing up, that I was seen as a delinquent, a problem child, a ne'er-do-well, a hopeless case. And I'm not a hopeless case. I've got value to add to the people around me and to society. But so I'm very interested in how did I end up there? And it's not excusing the poor decisions that I've made, but we know that these kids who end up in young offenders, there's often a history of abuse, there's often poverty, there's often systemic inequality. Nottingham is one of the poorest, parts of Nottingham are like the poorest areas of England and therefore Europe, because we know that, I'm sure we're one of the most unequal societies. And so, that goes with a culture of crime, a culture of not feeling invested in the system, a culture of poor mental health. And so for me, it's not about excusing my behavior. It's about trying to understand it, because do we actually want to reduce crime? And if we do, then we need to look at the reasons why people may be messing up, making mistakes, and making those decisions that can leave a mark against their name for the rest of their lives.
Absolutely. So tell us, you said about this kind of, I suppose, these sexual encounters with older men, which you just mentioned. That is an experience which I know lots of young cisgendered gay men also went through. So it's quite a common thing amongst lots of LGBTQ people at a certain age, often from smaller towns with a lack of a big LGBTQ support network, maybe. So just say what do you think, from looking back, what do you think kind of lay behind that and how you felt about it?
Well, there's two things here, in the sense that it is absolutely connected to the LGBT thing, because we know that LGBT kids are highly vulnerable. Study after study around the world confirms, what to me is just as plain as day, because I've lived it. If you're being bullied at school, if you are being told by the people around you and the wider culture that you are a joke, that you are disgusting, that you're less than other people, if you're facing violence and stuff, well, you're going to feel rubbish, right? So if you're receiving all of those messages, you're going to be vulnerable, right? And if predatory older men, which sadly they are out there, in every section of society, ready to take advantage of vulnerable young people, and so in that sense, it is an LGBT issue, because we know that those kids are vulnerable. But then, I know girls in these towns, who are being taken advantage of, in not quite the same way, because they were meeting them in different places, but ultimately it's the same thing. Those men should have known better. And we see this again and again, and it really upsets me and breaks my heart, when these news, sorry, I'm speaking really funny, it's difficult to talk about. Can I start again on some bits? Sorry, so am I going to make a real pain for you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, normally we put it out as is, but we can.
Oh, okay. Oh shit.
It's right. Don't worry. No, it's fine. We could just edit that. But just start from where you go. It's honestly, it's very relaxed. It's very casual.
Sorry. It's just, and also I want to make sure that I'm saying it right, because that people will jump on me if I word it.
Got you.
But it's very traumatizing when you see these abuse scandals hit the news, because it sort of destroys your faith in people and humanity, and you think, gosh, is this just what people do when they can get away with it? And I know it's not all men, and I really desperately want to believe, that there are lots of good people out there, but it's enough for it to be a problem, and so one of the things that I'm calling for is an anti-bullying policy, that's nationwide, that protects all kids from gender-based bullying, whether that's kids who are perceived to be trans, who are perceived to be gay, or, you know, we know that girls are really facing a lot of sexual harassment at school now, and teachers are saying they just don't know what to do about it. So, you know, kids, I don't think we are doing the best by the kids in our society. I think that we need to make sure that everybody's safe and protected, you know, and I feel very strongly about that, and I also feel very disappointed because the conversations that I see, and perhaps it's because of who I am and my sort of my position, my public profile, I see a lot of talk about the potential danger that trans people pose to the rest of society. And I just don't think we're talking enough about the people who are really vulnerable, and kind of coming together to work on a common solution, you know, which I think is possible if we target the real threat in society, which is sadly, you know, one or two, you know, there is a number of, you know, predatory older men that need to be kept an eye on.
Absolutely.
Am I waffling? I feel like I'm waffling loads.
No, you're literally not waffling at all.
This is heavy stuff though, right? You know, yeah. This is really heavy stuff, and they're difficult conversations to have, and it's scary having them, and it's scary talking about these things that you know, I've done and have happened to me. And we've got a plane again overhead.
Can't hear it. I genuinely can barely hear the plane.
Perfect.
What you said is beautifully said. Honestly, it's beautifully said. When you became, because you know, you were the first trans columnist for Vogue. You, as you know, you went on Question Time. It's quite an intimidating experience the first time you go on, as I can also testify. You know, you were there in magazines, you writing, you were on TV. When that started to happen, how did you feel? Well, I don't know, given what the background you describe and your hopes and maybe your fears when you were younger, what was it like when that all started to happen?
I think, you know, at that time, there weren't really any trans people who were taken seriously in the public eye, which is kind of why I wanted to put myself out there, because I always felt that I was good with words, and you know, that I could be one of those people that appeared in the newspaper or that appeared on the news, and you know, I say, you know, that I'm not you, basically. I'm never going to write a book like you, because you know, you love it, don't you? Love all of the political stuff, and
I hate writing, but I don't.
But you follow the Westminster stuff, and you like reading the books and everything. And to be honest with you, if it hadn't have been for the fact that I was bullied and oppressed, I don't think I'd have put myself in that space, you know. So, I mean, I've done Question Time 3 times now, and you know, I tried to sort of, you know, hold my own, and you know, I did always say to them before I went on, you know, I'm not a political pundit, but I can give a young working class perspective, my perspective, you know, and a slightly different perspective. So, you know, it's weird, because then I got into a really newsy space, because having done that, then I got invited onto Newsnight and all of these things, and really I don't know how much I've got to say really about politics. My message has always been anti-bullying, and just trying to call for people to be a little bit kinder, you know, and just approach, you know, trans people with a little bit more kindness and compassion and understanding, which in our society is seen to be this political thing. And I felt a huge pressure, to be honest, because there just wasn't, there literally in 2013, there just weren't trans people appearing on the news, commenting on stuff, you know, appearing on the covers of magazines, having books out, winning awards, doing all the stuff that we are doing now. And, you know, thank God, you know, that people are able to have their voices heard now, and we've got a range of different people getting their voices heard, because, you know, I felt this huge pressure, particularly when I went on Question Time. It was like, I've got to represent a whole community. Well, I can't do that, you know, and I'm not perfect either. So you can't make me into a role model, because I don't want that pressure either. And I'm not perfect, and I'm not a role model, you know. So, you know, there are other people who are more appropriate to fill that role. and it was just depressing, because you'd get all of these people making sort of really mean, horrible comments about trans people in the media, and it was like there was nobody to sort of respond to them. So in many ways it does feel like it's worse now, but at least when people are seeing these really nasty things that people are putting out there, they can think, but that doesn't match up with what I think of Laverne Cox, or I really loved Juno Dawson's books growing up, or I liked what Paris said about Brexit on Question Time. And so they've at least got some sort of points of reference where they can say, maybe this hateful image that's being portrayed is not quite as black and white as it's being presented to us. And Abigail Thorne as well, who I know that you spoke to recently, she just does fantastic video essays, and people follow her because she's really good at communicating philosophy to people in a way that's lively and engaging and readily understood. And I think actually that is the real sort of the work that needs to be done, is for people to see us as human beings with value, rather than the political argument side of things, because they'll always find a way to justify their bigotry. I don't think you can win that argument through politics, personally.
Yeah, I mean, history will certainly record you as a trailblazer, and when I speak to some of the trans people you're speaking about, whose platforms came after you, or who came out after you, they talk about you in those terms. That you were the first big kind of trans person in the media world. But I suppose what I was going to ask is what you mentioned there, which is, transphobia is not a British specific problem, but there is quite a specific manifestation of it here, in that in the United States, generally speaking, transphobia is associated with the Republican right, whilst if you look at the Democrats, progressives, whether they're people who call themselves centrists or liberals or socialists, feminists, certainly, there is a consensus which is inclusive of trans people. That's just not true in Britain. In Britain, of course, the anti-trans, and it does behave like a cult, they are very strong, not just on the right, but within the so-called liberal press, and also not just amongst so-called liberals and centrists, but some people who are left-wing are some actually the worst offenders. And I suppose what I'm wondering is, before asking about the general kind of, what transphobia in this country, and I know that's a well-rehearsed discussion, but what about the impact on you? Because you remain one of the few visible trans people in public life, but for a long time you were pretty much the only one. And as a result, that bile and hatred gets targeted at you. Of course it does. I mean, all trans people experience transphobia, but, in their communities and so on. But this was, you as a target. What impact does that have?
It's just really depressing.
Yeah.
I mean, I did Woman's Hour today, and I opened up about being abused, bullied, beaten up as a child. And then you look at the comments in response to that, and they're calling me a man. They're calling me a gay man. They're implying that I'm a pervert. They're saying they're disgusted that Woman's Hour had me on, that it's man's hour, that it's grooming hour. And I can't get my head around it. I just cannot understand the level of just hatred and vitriol. And it's interesting where it comes from, because Reni Eddo-Lodge, in her book, Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race, details in the chapter on feminism really, really well, and really, lays it out very, very calmly, the hostility that she encountered in the British media and within sort of feminist circles. Well, they were feminist circles. I don't know why I'm doing quote unquote. When she was trying to put forward as a young Black woman an anti-racist perspective. And I faced hostility from exactly the same sort of people, and in some cases, I mean, literally exactly the same people. And it's just depressing. It's really, 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 really depressing. And it makes you feel like you're not welcome. It makes you feel like, I mean, the thing that I can't get over is like, in this country, there is a movement to say that it's really, really, really important to us that we get to tell you that you're not a real woman, you're a man, you can't have children, haha. And I'm like, seriously, like, is that where we're at in 2021? Just the lack of humanity, the lack of compassion, the lack of decency. I'm embarrassed to live in a country where this is taken seriously. I'm embarrassed to live in a country where it seemed to be a political debate that you can be rude to people at work, and they say, well, we're just claiming, it's biology, it's a fact, you can't have children. And it's like, well, lots of people can't, but why do you go? It's just a very odd thing that it seemed to be legitimate to essentially be cruel and to be rude. I mean, we're supposed to pride ourselves on being, manners. We're so overly polite. Well, I don't see that when I look at the public discourse. I see people behaving just disgustingly to other human beings, and it's depressing. And I think that with the states, they've got their own problems, and I think if you are marginalized and you don't have access to healthcare, you're facing a whole different set of issues. Although honestly, access to healthcare in this country is not ideal. But I do think that at least within sort of mainstream liberal spaces, they have at least a basic understanding of why intersectionality is important. Again, I'm not saying it's perfect, because clearly it's not. But here, I do think a lot of it comes down to class. There's a certain type of person, and frankly, Owen, they don't really like working class women, and they don't like black women, and they don't like trans women, or anybody who's not their sort of fancy sort of posh waitress feminism.
When I interviewed Judith Butler,
I'm going to get loads of crap for this. I'm going to get loads of crap. I don't care.
Well, if so, there's this quote I sometimes refer to. The Hugh Gaitskell was Labour leader in the 50s, and at a Labour conference once, his wife turned to him and said that the wrong people are clapping. And I always think to myself, as long as the right people clap and the right people boo, that's fine. If you get crap for this, you're getting crap off terrible people. They're bigots. They're people, including in very powerful, influential position, who use their power and influence in order to marginalize voices who are systematically marginalized. And they themselves are often there, not on the basis of their ability, not on the basis of their talent, because they had all the odds stacked in their favor from birth. They are dripping with privilege, and they are there, and they know it. And that's what's even worse, Paris. You know what? That's what's even worse. That's why you wind them up even more. Because you are a working class trans woman from a council estate in Nottinghamshire, and these are people who've been spoon-fed with privilege from the day they were born, and they're not as talented as you, and your very existence is a constant reminder of their own privilege. So anyway, if you get crap for it,
I agree. I agree. I think there's a lot of very bitter people out there, and it's just sad, because and it's like with the hatred that you see online, it just makes me think you're not happy to do that. Why would you abuse somebody and bully somebody if your life was full and meaningful and you felt good about yourself? And I genuinely, I'm not religious, but I pray for those people and hope that they reach a better place and some inner peace and just some basic humanity, really.
Maybe if I'm obviously not as nice a person as you, because I hope they also find that peace and that humanity, but maybe out of positions of power and influence, and let some other people take their place who don't have a history of bigotry and trying to marginalize people who have huge odds stacked against them from birth, as they try and promote their own, who are privileged people with huge bigotry. But, you're more forgiving than me. On that more general point, and I don't, but I spoke about, I've had lots of trans people on this podcast and channel, and we, obviously inevitably the conversation does talk about this a bit, but I speak privately. Lots of trans people tell me, to be honest, Aaron, I want to leave this country. There's actually one trans person who's had asylum accepted in New Zealand, a British trans woman, because of the level of transphobia here being whipped up. I mean, it is a, and I'm so.
I feel.
Go on.
I feel that, yeah. I don't. I mean, the message that I'm getting is that I'm not welcome in this country.
Which is just an affront,
That I mean, that's how I feel. It's like, okay, if we've decided in this country that we're saying it's okay to basically bully and be rude to people like me, why would you wanna stick around? So yeah, I've thought a lot about leaving. Yeah.
Do you ever think to yourself, though? And
I'm really privileged as well. This is the other thing. So if I'm feeling like that, and I have to own that, I'm one of, the most privileged trans people in the country, probably in some ways, and it gets me down. So, if you are living on a council estate, maybe you're getting abused, you're getting, dog crap put through your letterbox, your family don't speak to you. Maybe you're not happy with how you look. Maybe you're being discriminated against in the workplace. And then you turn on the television or you open the newspaper and you see people calling you, ridiculing the appearance of trans people, saying that we're this great problem. That the idea that, some of these people that are campaigning against my existence would have me sort of like carry a sort of identity card around and be forced to use separate toilets or something, or the men's. I mean, I'm just not going to do that, So if it does get worse, I will go, and I feel awful because I know that maybe not everybody's in a position to do that. But I mean, have you got any better? I mean, I'm literally all out of ideas. I've spent the past decade doing two things: trying to change myself and make myself more acceptable to sort of society, and to sort of to blend in and to look, quote unquote, like a real girl, quote unquote. And I know that that's problematic because, I want to live in a country where everybody feels safe to walk down the street, no matter what their gender expression. But also, I personally would like to try and escape that discrimination. So that's one way of trying to achieve that, because, when I didn't blend in, shall we say, I would get abused. So if you get abused when people perceive you as trans, it's quite logical that you would want to try and take steps to not look like you're trans, to escape that oppression, right? But then on the other hand, I've been like, okay, well, that's fine if I can, look how I want to look and walk down the street, but also it should be okay for everybody to walk down the street. So I've tried my best to try and change society, but I can't. There's only so much that you can do, and we are less than 1% of the population. So there are lots of great people working towards that goal now, but it does feel like it's getting worse in lots of ways. So there does come a point where you just think, well, maybe I just have to go and go to a country where this moral panic hasn't taken hold.
I think lots of people who aren't trans don't realise that things they don't even think about become these big burdens and fears, like using a public toilet, for lots of
yeah and I never felt that before. I never felt, because touch wood, I feel that I do blend in, and generally I would think that people perceive me as female when I'm out and about, and that is a privilege. It shouldn't be a privilege, but it is. It just makes my life easier, and that's a fact. And obviously now that I've got a public profile and all of this heat in this discussion, I felt very uncomfortable, after years of using public toilets and not causing anybody any problems and not having any issues in that way. I feel really paranoid now that somebody might confront me, and also paranoid that they may be paranoid and that my presence there is going to upset them, because who wants to feel like that somebody's going to look at you and think, I know her, she's trans, or, she's really tall. Could she be one of those trans ones? And for them to then feel uncomfortable or afraid because of what they've read about people like you in the newspaper and the threat that you pose, it's just horrible, Owen. It's really, it really is just, really depresses me and just makes me sad. It makes me really, 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 really sad. I don't know what else to say about it.
I mean, it's actually also led to cisgendered lesbians who are butch being challenged, and people trying to remove them from women's toilets. That's where this has led to.
Yeah.
Just so I'm going to try and end on an optimistic note, and I know that sounds hard, but the reason I'm going to put this to you, that often when a minority starts getting more visibility and more wider acceptance, there is a backlash, and that doesn't make the backlash any easier. I mean, if we take, for example, the struggle for gay rights in this country, you got the partial decriminalization of homosexuality in 1967. It was partial, and actually more gay men were criminalized after that than before it, because they started using other laws to do it. And in Scotland, it was only partially decriminalized in 1980. And then as you got growing acceptance, you got full-blown moral panics whipped up by the media, which was then used to justify Section 28, which was the first homophobic legislation passed for 3 centuries, I think, in 1987, which banned the so-called promotion of homosexuality in the public sector, not least of all schools. So people like us, we didn't get LGBTQ education growing up. But I suppose if I was going to try and be hopeful, and this is just me putting it to you because it's not my place, but if we look at many of the fury and the bile from, I would say, completely obsessed, radicalized transphobes. If you look through their Twitter profiles, they're not talking about, I don't know, the mere slight issue of the biggest global emergency since the war. They're not talking about the existential threat of the climate emergency. They're not talking about poverty. They're not talking about justice. They're not talking about, I don't know, the closure of refuges for women. They're not talking about the fact that 86% of cuts have fallen on women. They're just talking about trans people. And you can just see it. They've obviously gone online, and this is how all cults operate. They go online, often quite vulnerable people, and they go through these rabbit holes, and they just get more and more and more extreme. And you can see it happening in real time sometimes on people's Twitter profiles. But actually, if you look at the polling, who is the most supportive of trans people? It's cisgendered women by actually a very big margin, according to every single poll, and younger people. And there is a generational battle going on because it doesn't fit exactly. My mum, bless her, who's coming to stay with me this weekend, 69 years old, spends a lot of time on Facebook arguing against anti-trans extremists. And there are young people, unfortunately, who also are anti-trans cultists. But generally speaking, younger people are far more accepting. And it's a problem, according to the polling, with older men, most of all. But does that not give some hope that actually the experience of gay rights does show that as things started to improve, there was a backlash, which was dreadful to go through, and combined with the AIDS crisis as well. But actually that things are likely to change because younger people and women actually are going to make it happen, as well as trans people who obviously are at the forefront and whose voices must be heard above all else.
Well, I'm hoping that Gen Z will save us. I know that they think that we're a bit naff because we use emojis, but they are much more accepting because they've grown up in a different world. Just like like when we were growing up, like when I was a kid, like Graham Norton was on the television. So I just grew up in a world where it was normal for gay people to be on television. But when my mum was growing up, that wasn't normal. Of course, it was full of gay people, but they didn't talk about the fact that they were gay. And you look at it now and you think, how did people not know that they were gay? But things did change. And I think the reason I wrote this book was because I wanted to tell a good story, right? And it's not
succeeded.
And it's not a polemical. It's not, but also I'm just so sick of like being stuck in the sort of the arguing about what it means and what it the definition of woman and all this kind of thing, and because it all just seems to me to be so completely devoid of context, right? And this is the context. This isn't an ideological argument. That is what my life was. That is the reality. And I really hope that people reading it will connect with something that I feel that is missing from the conversation publicly, which is empathy. And what better way to encourage people to sort of empathize with a human being than through sharing your story and through literature, right? But in terms of the, you know, are things getting better? Well, yes, and this is the thing. It's like a lot of this stuff is like not that new, really, because people were still being really unpleasant like 10, 15 years ago. You know, the thing that sort of made me want to become, you know, a campaigner or somebody who's changing things, although I wouldn't feel that that word particularly applies to me in 2021, was seeing, you know, a piece at Germaine Greer in which she refers to trans people as these ghastly parodies of women. And it just went, you know, nobody commented on it. So I don't think that that's got any worse. I think it's the fact that we are noticing it now, and actually more and more people are realizing, oh, that's actually really unpleasant. Who are you referring to there? Because my friend's child feels that way, and that's not very nice to say that. So I do think it's progress, but I've said this a long time. I think I sort of said it the first time that I met you, possibly because I met you at the so we met at the Amnesty Pride thing.
Oh yeah, I think we did. Is that the first time we ever met?
Yeah, and which was a while ago now, right? But you know, I've said for a while that for me, it's not about whether or not we'll have trans rights. It's about, are we going to have human rights? Full stop, right? You know, are we going to? Because for me, if we live in a society that claims at least to value decency and rule of law and truth and honesty and science and, you know, just being a decent human being and being civilized, essentially, then of course we will have rights for trans people, and trans people will be able to live their lives. I don't think people realize that it's all on the table. You know, is it going to be nice to be a person? You know, and you talked about climate change, and I talk about this, you know, as a trans person, that terrifies me, because nobody's going to respect your pronouns when they're trampling on your neck to get the last bottle of water, you know, in on the supermarket shelf, you know, because the food supply has been disrupted, which sounds like a really dramatic thing to say, but this is what we're looking at, you know. All it takes is a drought or a flood, you know, the food supply, you know, we do have problems with access to water moving forward. We're not talking about any of this stuff, and who's going to get it in the neck first? You know, it's minorities, I think. But I think that there are enough people who are invested in making sure that there is a society that's pleasant to live in for everybody. You know, I really believe that most people are good, and you know, my experiences in my personal life, the people that I work with, the families of the men that I date, my own family, people that I meet in shops, you know, most people are kind and good and just want to live in peace. But I think that we've got some people who are troublemakers that are whipping things up and really stirring up some trouble. But I ultimately believe that human beings want to be peaceful and live together, you know, in peace. And I have to believe that. I have to believe it for me, and I have to believe it for the kids in my family and for all of us. So I hope that we're right about that, Owen. I really do.
Indeed. And what always sets them off, the anti-trans brigade, is when you say they're on the wrong side of history, but they are on the wrong side of history, and history will be damning. Paris, that was beautiful. That was wonderful. I think a really nice place to end it. Everyone must go and get themselves a copy of this memoir. It really is a beautiful piece of writing. It's a real roller coaster of emotions. And as Paris says, it's not a trans memoir. It is the memoir of an extraordinary person and their extraordinary life. And you'll laugh at it, you'll cry, you'll really will love it as a brilliant piece of writing that's so insightful in so many ways. So we're very lucky to have had you, and do get a copy of What It Feels Like for a Girl by the wonderful Paris Leeds. Thank you so much, Paris.
Thank you so much for having me. And also, I don't know if we're still rolling now, but thank you for just being one of the first people to sort of get it, really, you know.
Well, I had to learn, and it was people like yourself who taught me, and that's what this should always be about. You know, I had a lot of internalized homophobia, let alone anything else. And actually, you know, for me, people like you having a platform and, you know, so thank you for educating me. You know, I got taught by people like yourself about this issue. I didn't, you know, no one's born understanding all these things. No one's born understanding gay people.
Yeah. Yeah,
we have to learn. But I had a great teacher. So thank you for being one of those teachers. And I hope people listening to your wonderful words today, if they're not sure about these issues, if, you know, or maybe if they've ended up going through these rabbit holes online, which end up radicalizing people, and with all the same lines that were thrown against gay people, biology is destiny, that, you know, gay people are sexual predators, gay people prey on children, gay people are a fetish, gay people are just, it's a mental illness. Same thing's been used against trans people. I hope if they've got as far as clicking on this video or this podcast, they'll go and educate themselves even more, because lots of people have, and they've turned away from this bigotry, and people like you are the reason why. So thank you, Paris. Well,
listen, let's go for a drink at some point. And I know you're not allowed to drink champagne, but I'll order some. You can have a sip of mine.
I'll have several gulps of your champagne. I can't wait till we get smashed. Lots of love, Paris.
Oh.